Shavua Tov, in the aftermath of the war against Hamas and Gaza, there is a striking, very short story in the book of Numbers, in the chapter of Chukat, which we're going to read in a few weeks, which, when one digs beneath it and looks at the way the rabbis interpret this story, it becomes extremely relevant to what we have just witnessed and are still witnessing. Let's hear, first of all, just the story as it's written in the biblical text, and then we will see all of the very perplexing things that the rabbis see in this story, behind this story. The story is that the Canaanite king of Arad, who dwells in the Negev, in the southern part of the Holy Land, heard that Israel was passing through and went to attack them and took captives. Israel then took an oath to the Lord, "If God will give this nation into my hand, I will destroy all of their cities." God hears the prayer of Israel and grants them victory, and the Israelites fulfill their promise and destroy this Canaanite king of Arad from the Negev's cities. That's the simple story. It sounds like a very straightforward thing. They attacked, we prayed, we won. But the rabbis say there's a lot more to unpack here, because there are things that don't fit. The first thing that doesn't fit is the Canaanite living in the Negev. The Negev is not where the Canaanites live. Instead, the Amalekites live in the Negev. And so the rabbis say, indeed, this Canaanite king of Arad was no Canaanite. He was a phony Canaanite. He was really an Amalekite, and his people were the Amalekites. And they were seeking the destruction of Israel, as they have always done. They have a virulent anti-Semitism in them. They wish to destroy Israel. From Haman to Hitler, the Amalekites have that as a goal. But this king, this Amalekite king of Arad, who was no Canaanite, but he wanted to fool the Israelites to make them think he was a Canaanite and his people were Canaanites. So he instructed his people to change their language. Do not speak Amalekite, instead speak Canaanite. What was the goal of this deception? Because if Israel prays to God that God saves them from Amalek, well then the Amalekites feared that indeed Israel would defeat them. So therefore the Amalekites said, let's fool them, make them think we're Canaanites, and Israel will pray to be saved from Canaanites. Since the prayer won't be accurate, God won't answer it, and we will succeed in finally destroying them. That was their plan. So Israel foils their plan, because Israel doesn't pray not for Canaanites nor for Amalekites. It says generically, this people, whoever these people who are attacking us, God please save us from them. And so, as the Yiddish expression goes, a Mensch tracht und Gott lacht. A man plans and God laughs. That's what happened here as well. We need to unpack this, because this is very strange, a very strange story. The first thing that jumps out is that the Amalekites are concerned about who Israel prays to God about. Why so? The Amalekites, according to the rabbis in our tradition, are the great atheists. They don't believe in any God whatsoever. Their symbol is the number 9. The Torah says, Asher Korcha, the number 9 is the most divisible of numbers. It implies randomness. And even their expression, the Torah, when it talks about the parasha of Zachor, of remembering what Amalekites did, it says, Karcha baderech, they came upon you on the way. That's from the root of the word mikre, which means random, accident. That's what the Amalekites are all about. They don't believe in God. So if they don't believe in God, then there's nobody listening to any prayers, and therefore who cares what the Israelites pray? Why are they taking such pains to get the Israelites to pray about Canaanites and not Amalekites? What do they care? They don't believe that prayer is effective at all. Well, maybe one could say that in their subconscious, there are no atheists in a foxhole, as it were. Maybe they're concerned. Okay, I can accept that. But I think there's a much more relevant answer. But that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, it doesn't seem like they were very smart. If they were trying to fool the Israelites into believing that they are not Amalekites but Canaanites, well, why didn't they succeed? They didn't succeed because they only went halfway. They changed their language, but they didn't bother to change what they were wearing. Now that seems like complete negligence, because if you're on one side of the battlefield and the other army's on the other side of the battlefield, the first thing, before you notice the language they're speaking, even if you can hear it, nobody's using loudspeakers, but even if you can hear the language they're speaking, The first thing you notice is what they're wearing. And if they're dressed like Amalekites, so then the Israelites are going to think they're Amalekites. So obviously Israel did hear their language somehow. Maybe there was some communication. And therefore there was confusion because on the one hand, they looked like Amalekites, but they were talking like Canaanites. This reminds me of Isaac when Jacob came in to get the blessing, posing as his brother Esau. So Isaac comments, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Esau, by the way, was the progenitor of Amalek. Amalek was a great grandson, I believe, or a grandson of Esau. So be that as it may, the Israelites now are going to say the same thing. The voice is the voice of Canaan, but the hands, the clothing, the appearance is that of Amalek. So who do we pray to God to be saved from? We don't know, so we'll just leave it blank. This nation. Why do the Amalekites miss the obvious solution of dressing like Canaanites to match the language? Why didn't they go that far? A final question, which we'll come to at the end, is when it says that this king of Arad, whomever he was, attacked Israel, he took captives. Rashi tells us, the commentator, that the captives was nothing more than one maidservant, probably herself a Canaanite maidservant. For this, Israel is going to war? For one maidservant, they're going to war? Wow, that's loyalty. What's that all about? Okay. So let's just unravel this, and the principle is very simple, and we should all know it from having watched the news and listened to the commentaries and hearing what some people say. When somebody says, I hate the Jews, I want them all dead, it's no great trick for the Jews to bond together and fight back with all of their determination. That's what a Amalekite would say. That would be the language of the Amalekites. We hate Jews. They're poison to the world. We want to get rid of them. The Jewish people has no problem being completely unified in the face of such a threat. But instead, if they say, well, we are an indigenous people. This is our land. We bear no malice against you Israelites, but you can't come and kick us out of our land and take it from us. That would be morally wrong. That is an argument made by the Canaanites, because we were going to enter the land of Canaan, as it was called, and we were commanded by God to destroy those Canaanite nations because they were utterly corrupt. As the Torah says, they practiced human sacrifice. They put their children in the fires of Molech. Horrible things. Their entire ideology, their pagan ideology, was an infectious dangerous way of life that was influencing the entire region, and God was bringing in a monotheistic nation that celebrates life, not death, and therefore God does not want any Canaanite influence to remain, because if it remains, they could, God forbid, corrupt the Israelites themselves. But the Canaanites will say, well, wait a second, okay, we have our religion, our ideology, but we live here and it's our land. So that is a kind of an argument that can resonate even among the people of Israel. And so therefore, the Amalekites' goal was not that they were going to try to influence God. They didn't believe in God. They didn't believe that prayer made a difference. But rather, they wanted to influence the Israelites. They wanted to divide and conquer, to cause the Israelites to have internal divisions. Should we really fight against them? Is it moral? Are we really doing the moral thing and coming into this land? Do we have the right to be here? After all, these people have lived here for a few hundred years. Maybe we don't have the right to be here. Make the Israelites weak internally. Make them doubt themselves, and then you can fight against them. That was the plot of this Amalekite. And that's what it means by changing the language. They should speak Canaanite. Not that they should speak the Canaanite language per se, but rather they should speak the arguments, the talking points of the Canaanites, because the talking points of the Amalekites would only unify the Israelites. But the Israelites did not fall for it. They sensed there was a plot here. They sensed there was evil afoot, and therefore they said, whomever these people are, whatever their arguments are, we are together. And the Torah uses specifically, Vayidar Yisrael neder. He, Israel, took an oath. it uses the singular, not they, the Israelites, but he, Israel, because we were completely unified. Because when the people of Israel are unified, nothing can stand in their way. So that is the underlying. And we find today in the world a lot of moral wavering on the part of people who have good intentions, but who don't really see with clarity the truth of the situation, just who Hamas is, just what their goal is. They are using the arguments of the Canaanites, but when you look at their charter, look at their website, listen to their speeches, they are speaking to themselves the language of the Amalekites, because that's their ultimate agenda. But to the world, they use the language of the Canaanites. And so that's very relevant to what's happening today. And just one other point. Who is this maidservant that we went to battle for? Well, I have a feeling that it might just refer to those people in Gaza, those Arabs, who would love nothing more than to live in peace side by Israel. And I was speaking to a friend who's in military intelligence, and he estimates that 99% of the Gazans, while they may not be Jew lovers, they certainly would rather Hamas be gone, and they'd rather just have quiet, normal lives. Perhaps this is teaching us that to fight, to liberate these Arabs from their Hamas oppressors, and every civilian casualty that happened in the Gaza Strip is a direct result of Hamas's use of them as human shields, and in some cases, Hamas rockets that didn't fire where they wanted them to go and fell right in their own communities. It's estimated that maybe 20% of the casualties in the Gaza Strip were caused by Hamas rockets, not even by Israel. So perhaps there is a moral obligation to fight against the Hamas, to get rid of the Hamas and thus liberate the silent majority of Arabs in the Gaza Strip who would love nothing more than to live normal lives side by side with Israel. Maybe don't love the Jews so much, but you know what? A partial peace is also a holy thing that should be pursued. Shavua Tov.